Viewers, welcome back to the show. We've been fortunate to have the services of Josh Fergeus tonight. Josh, we're talking about this individual that you're dealing with, and you said that he's had a mesothelioma for the last 8 years. That seems to be a long time to have that disease, because most people with mesothelioma don't last outside 12 months.
Yeah. Look, there's a lot of variation, I think. A lot of people have had very different experiences and been exposed in different ways for different periods of time, and their bodies respond differently as well. It's often a matter of how many fibres are affecting them, have been absorbed into the lining of their lungs and so on. There's a lot of highly technical medical things that go on there, as you can imagine. But that's one of the difficulties here is every case is sort of different. And in Australia at the moment, we've got about 2,500 people every year being diagnosed with asbestos-related disease. Yeah, absolutely. And it affects each of them in different ways.
Well, considering that the WorkCover Authority and also, WorkSafe and TAC only budget for about 2,500 to 3,000 serious injuries a year, John, 2,500 asbestos-related diseases is pretty high, isn't it?
It's very high, and ideally all of those people should be seeing lawyers, Tony.
I think so. And also the family members, the housewives that have cleaned the overalls, they're probably exposed too, aren't they?
Exactly.
John, I want to go to this case of Amaka and King, because it's very interesting on the facts. What are the facts, John?
Tony, Eric King, back in the early 70s, his employer has sent him to a James Hardie factory on 3 separate occasions for approximately 2 hours each occasion. On each occasion, for a total of 6 hours, Tony, he's inhaled dust particles, asbestos dust particles. Come forward 30 odd years, Tony, he's contracted mesothelioma. He's issued proceedings, a jury trial of 8 days, Tony. The jury have come back with over $1 million compensation for him. So it's a great result for him. It's gone to appeal, the Victorian Supreme Court of Appeal. They considered a lot of issues, particularly quantum. The defendant was saying that he was paid too much, $700,000 for pain and suffering. Court of Appeal said no.
It reflects today's...
It reflects today's judgment, but the key issue being causation.
Yes.
The Court of Appeal found that there was sufficient evidence on the basis of the expert witnesses that for 6 hours there was enough connection that this injury was
contracted
caused
at that factory.
Exactly.
Josh, of interest, Mr. King walks into this factory site. There's no one there to greet him at the gate, no one to warn him about asbestos in the air, no one to give him any protective equipment, that is a mask or gloves or whatever else. Is this something that happened on a regular basis in these sites?
Oh, yeah, really. And up until a lot more recently than you'd probably imagine as well. I mean, there's been evidence to suggest that asbestos causes various diseases since the 30s and 40s, and yet for 30, 40 years after that, these sort of things were really, really common. And it was only in 2003 that we actually had the ban on importing and use of asbestos in Australia.
So that's when they cut it out.
But it's even continued, been shown to be continued after that in certain cases, even though it's now completely illegal. So it's something we're going to see the effects of for a very, very long time, considering it takes 20 or 30 years often for some of these symptoms to start to show.
Well, sadly, Josh, in India, they're using it widespread now, asbestos sheets. Yep,
absolutely. And there's been discussion of the fact that Canada's been exporting asbestos-related products into India for use in India. I believe they've just said very, very recently they're going to stop that practice from Canada. But there's other issues as well. I mean, in Sri Lanka, they're processing asbestos as well. There's been a lot of issues there. There's a couple of hospitals there that have now started to specialise in those effects. So it's pretty widespread, and we're actually pretty lucky in Australia now to have had this ban at all come in, even though it's far from perfect.
John, in the case of King, the thing that really helped the plaintiff was the factory CEO or Chief Medical Officer talking about the extent of particles in the air. So it was their own documents that put them in.
Their own
Is
documents,
that surprising?
Well, yes and no. Their own documents confirmed that, but also the testimony of the worker, that his evidence was he walked into the factory and he could see specks of particles in the air, in the light. and those particles, the evidence found, were asbestos fibres. Now, that was damning. That was damning, Tony, and the jury believed him, and he received his compensation. And this just goes to show that he was only there for 6 hours in total, Tony.
It's not long.
It's not long. So there's a lot of people out there that would have contracted this disease and thought, you know what, I can't recall, or it was probably a short period of time. Well, it only takes a limited time of exposure to contract this disease, and therefore you do have a claim.
Josh, sadly, they talk a lot about background exposure. What's that?
Well, the fact is that, when you walk down the street, there is generally a certain level of asbestos particles in the air. The thing is, though, that's a safe level of exposure. Most of us will have been exposed to asbestos in some way, shape or form. However, we're at no risk. The issue that you're talking about, John, when this gentleman went into that situation, it's the matter to do with concentration of particles in the air. It's a short amount of exposure, but it's a high level of compensation. It's think like a dose of radiation, for example. Yep. We're all exposed to low-level radiation on a daily basis, microwaves, phones, etc. But then when you go into a situation in a nuclear reactor, it can be 10 minutes, and that's too much. So it's a similar way of thinking about it, I think, that's required.
Sadly, John, when I was a kid growing up in Moonee Ponds, we used to use asbestos sheets to dry on the ground.
Yeah.
Now you'd play all those kids' games and...
Back, 20, 30 years ago, it was no one knew the dangers, Tony. But now we do know the dangers. And as I said before, every worker out there that has contracted this disease is entitled to legal and rightful compensation, monetary compensation.
Josh, is it fair to say that most people out there that are probably suffering from some sort of asbestos-related condition or disease can't pinpoint where they got it from?
Look, that happens quite a lot. I mean, you get the people that have been working in factories, or they've been working with building materials. They know to be asbestos. They know. But then you're exactly right. We're seeing a lot more cases now of people who can't exactly pinpoint these things. The most important things for people to do is when they hear from their doctor or their medical professional they've got some of the symptoms, they need to get themselves on a register. Most of the law firms that deal with these sorts of claims have a register, so they should contact a law firm and be put on the register, even if it's not something that's affecting their quality of life yet. And then it's a case where if they do want to claim compensation at some point, they've done that, they've gone through that process.
And John, even if you can't pinpoint exactly where it happened, they've still got a fund set up to compensate people, James Hardie Fund.
Exactly.
Josh, I really appreciate you being on the show. Is there anything else you want to tell the public? Or more importantly, what about some donations to your organisation?
Well,
and the website?
Absolutely. So you can visit our website, asbestoswise.com.au. That has a range of information and resources for people. So information about what is asbestos, what to look out for, protective clothing to wear if you're thinking of renovating your home or you think you may be exposed, some of the steps you can take to have asbestos removed, etc., details of our support groups, and as you said, really importantly, a link where you can donate to our work to support the victims of asbestos-related disease, and also support our work getting information out there to the general public about the dangers of asbestos.
John, Josh, I want to thank you for coming on board. No Viewers, can you go to our website, Facebook page, Twitter, and just follow these stories? And also, thanks for watching the show, and always remember to stay safe.